Tonight, when you close your eyes, something strange is going to happen to you. 1 second, you'll be lying there, thinking, and the next second, you'll be gone. No transition, no warning, no memory of it happening. You will simply cease to exist for a few hours and then come back. And you've done this every single night of your life, thousands of times. But you have never once witnessed it happen. Not a single memory of the moment you crossed over. You can remember lying in bed. You can remember your last thought. But the actual moment you disappeared? Gone. Every time. Without exception. Why? Most people assume they know the answer. You get tired, your eyes get heavy, and eventually you drift off. Simple, natural, obvious. But that explanation skips over something that should genuinely disturb you. The fact that your brain erases its own shutdown every single night on purpose. And the reason it does that reveals something about consciousness that scientists are still struggling to fully explain. Let's start with what's actually happening inside your skull in those final minutes, because it's not what most people think. Most people imagine sleep like a dimmer switch. You gradually get drowsier, the world gets fuzzy, and eventually you cross some soft threshold into darkness. That's the story we tell ourselves. But that's not what's happening. Sleep onset is not a slow fade. It's a cliff edge. Your brain doesn't gradually wind down. It actively dismantles your awareness in a specific sequence, like a technician shutting down a system, one component at a time. Here's how that sequence works. In the final minutes before sleep, your brain begins suppressing activity in the thalamus. The thalamus is a small structure deep in the center of your brain, and it functions as the relay station for everything. Every sound you hear, every sensation you feel, every piece of information that reaches your conscious awareness has to pass through the thalamus first. Think of it as the gatekeeper between the outside world and your conscious mind. When you fall asleep, that gatekeeper starts closing the door, and the exact moment it closes, your ability to form new memories stops. That's the answer. That's why you can't remember falling asleep. Not because nothing is happening, not because your brain is switching off, but because your memory recording system shuts down before the rest of you does. The lights don't go out all at once. The cameras stop rolling first, and whatever happens after that, you simply have no record of it. Scientists have a name for this: sleep onset amnesia, and it's one of the most bizarre and underappreciated quirks of human neuroscience. Your brain doesn't black out at sleep onset. It actually continues processing information for several more minutes after you lose conscious awareness. EEG recordings, the machines that measure electrical activity in the brain, show continued, organized activity long after behavioral consciousness has ended. Your brain keeps running. It just stops filing the footage. But here's where it gets genuinely strange. Researchers have done experiments where they wake people up just a few seconds after sleep onset, after the EEG confirms they have already crossed into stage 1 sleep. And they ask a simple question: were you asleep? And most people say no. They insist they were still awake, still thinking, still present. The EEG shows they were already gone. Their brain had crossed over, but the last memory their conscious mind had formed was the experience of being awake. So from the inside, there was no gap, no transition, no moment of crossing, just awake and then it's morning. Which means the feeling you have of lying there thinking, of being almost asleep but not quite, that sensation itself might already be part of a dream. Your consciousness might have already ended while you were still experiencing it. The you that was almost asleep may not have been you at all. Now here's the discovery that changed how scientists think about all of this. In 2006, neuroscientist Yuval Nir and his team at the Weizmann Institute published findings that turned sleep research upside down. They found, using implanted electrodes in epilepsy patients, that individual neurons in the brain can fall asleep while the rest of the brain is still technically awake. Not the whole brain going offline at once. Individual cells, isolated groups of neurons going dark, one by one, while the surrounding tissue is still firing normally. Your brain doesn't fall asleep all at once. It falls asleep in pieces, like lights going out in a building, floor by floor, room by room, long before the last person locks the door. And the last room to go dark, the very last structure to lose activity, is the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for self-awareness, for the sense of being a self that is having experiences. Which means there is a sequence. Piece by piece, your brain goes offline. Memory recording stops early. Sensory gating closes. Awareness fragments. And somewhere in there, the part of you that knows it's you flickers out last. And you never remember any of it. There's a word for the state your brain passes through in those final seconds. Hypnagogia. It sounds obscure, but it describes something every single human being experiences every single night, and almost no one can recall. Hypnagogia is the transitional state between wakefulness and sleep, the threshold, and it might be the most unusual state of consciousness a human brain is capable of producing. In hypnagogia, something remarkable happens. With the thalamic gates partially closed, with sensory input from the outside world starting to drop away, your brain doesn't go quiet, it goes wild. It starts generating images, sounds, voices, and physical sensations entirely from within. With no external input and no logical structure to organize them, these experiences feel completely real. You might see vivid geometric patterns behind your eyes. You might hear your name called clearly in an empty room. You might feel a sudden sensation of falling, or of being watched, or of floating upward from the mattress. And then your memory recording stops, and it's gone. This is the moment you are trying to remember and cannot. This is the threshold. What makes hypnagogia so fascinating to neuroscientists is that it represents a kind of controlled hallucination. The same brain regions that generate dreams, the visual cortex, the auditory cortex, the limbic system, begin firing without the usual oversight of the prefrontal cortex, which is already starting to go offline. The result is perception without a perceiver, experience without a self to have it. Your brain is generating a world, but the part of you that would remember it is already gone. And some of history's most creative minds figured out how to use this. Thomas Edison, one of the most prolific inventors in history, had a practice that his assistants found bizarre. He would take naps in his workshop chair, holding a steel ball bearing loosely in each hand. Positioned beneath each hand was a metal plate on the floor. The moment Edison drifted into sleep, the moment his muscles relaxed fully, the ball bearings would drop, strike the metal plates, and the clatter would wake him, right at the edge, right at the threshold. He did this deliberately. He called these micro-naps his most productive thinking time, and credited them with some of his most important insights. Salvador Dali did the same thing, famously, with a key held over a plate. He called the resulting state the slumber with a key. The surrealist painter who redefined what visual imagination could be was literally hunting the hypnagogic threshold on purpose, every day, because he knew that whatever existed just on the other side of sleep was something his waking mind could not produce alone. Nikola Tesla reportedly did something similar. So did Edgar Allan Poe, who described the hypnagogic state in his writings as a borderland of fantastic imagery that he tried to observe and record. The mathematician John von Neumann, who helped develop both the computer and the atomic bomb, was known to solve problems during the moment of falling asleep. These were not people who were drowsy and distracted. These were people who recognized that the threshold between wakefulness and sleep was a place, a real cognitive state, with properties unlike anything else the human brain could produce, and they were deliberately going there. So why does your brain erase it? The leading neuroscientific theory is that sleep onset amnesia is a protective mechanism. Consider what the experience of losing consciousness actually feels like from the inside when you catch glimpses of it. The world becomes unreal. Your thoughts lose logical structure. Sensations appear from nowhere. The sense of being a continuous, coherent self starts to dissolve. If your brain allowed you to fully experience and remember that process, if every night you lay in bed and watched yourself come apart, felt your own self-awareness flicker and fade, your brain might interpret that as dying. or as a catastrophic neurological event, and trigger a panic response powerful enough to prevent sleep entirely. Sleep onset amnesia may be your brain's way of protecting you from yourself, of letting the shutdown happen without you witnessing it. The gatekeeper doesn't just close the door to the outside world, it closes the door to the inside world too. And you wake up on the other side with no memory of the crossing. But here's what that means for how you think about consciousness. Every single night, you cease to exist. Not metaphorically, not poetically. In every measurable neurological sense, the continuous thread of your conscious experience, the thing you call you, stops. And then it starts again in the morning, picking up where it left off, with a memory of having been continuous even though it wasn't. Think about that. The version of you that wakes up tomorrow will have memories of being you today. It will feel like the same person who went to sleep. But the neurological bridge between those two experiences, the actual moment of continuity, is not there. It was erased before it could be recorded. Every morning, you wake up as something that believes it is the continuation of yesterday's self, without any actual memory of the handoff. Philosophers have argued about this for centuries. If you were knocked unconscious and a perfect copy of you was created while you were out, and you woke up as that copy, would you know the difference? The honest answer is no. And every night, something closer to that question than most people are comfortable with is actually happening. The part that scientists are still working out is where consciousness actually goes. For decades, the assumption was that consciousness simply switches off at sleep onset, like a light going out, and switches back on at waking. But the picture emerging from modern neuroscience is more complicated and more unsettling than that. Consciousness doesn't switch off cleanly. It fragments. Different parts of the brain go offline at different times. Different aspects of subjective experience dissolve in a sequence rather than all at once. And somewhere in that sequence, in some order that we still don't fully understand, the part that forms memories goes, and then the part that knows it is a self goes, and then whatever is left goes, and you are gone. And you have never seen it happen. You have fallen asleep tens of thousands of times, and you have never once witnessed the moment. You have no data on it, no memory of it, no impression of what it feels like to cease, because the ceasing takes the recorder with it when it goes. Every night, the last thing that goes dark is the light that would have let you see the darkness. And every morning, you wake up having forgotten, again, that it happened at all.